Right now, something huge is happening in AI, and most people don't even realize it yet. For the first time, we're seeing two AIs that don't just generate content, they think. Or at least, that's what their creators promise. Google has dropped Gemini 3.0 Pro Thinking. OpenAI has unleashed ChatGPT 5.1 Thinking. Two massive upgrades. Two different philosophies. And only one question matters. Which one is actually smarter? I didn't want marketing claims. I didn't want hype. I wanted proof. So I ran both AIs through the exact same challenges. Real tasks, real tests, real outputs. No edited prompts. No retries. Whatever they answered the first time, that's what you're about to see. These weren't easy tasks either. I'm talking about code challenges that would break junior developers, physics simulations that depend on precise math, logic puzzles that require step-by-step reasoning, and even a writing assignment that exposes whether an AI can sound like a real human being, not a machine pretending to be one. And the results are not what you think. Sometimes, Gemini just crushed it. Clean reasoning, tight math, code that worked perfectly on the first run. Other times, ChatGPT wrote something so human, so natural, that Gemini looked like Wikipedia having an identity crisis. And in one case, one AI solved a puzzle instantly, while the other didn't even land on the right answer. Now, if you're new to thinking mode, here's why this matters. Traditional AI gives you output. You ask a question, it generates a response. Done. Thinking mode is different. It's supposed to show the chain of reasoning, the way the AI breaks down a problem, analyzes it, decides what matters, and builds the solution step by step. More like how a real expert would think. But it's one thing to claim it. It's another to put it under pressure. So I made the rules simple. Same task, same input, one shot, no corrections, no backtracking. Let the models reveal who actually thinks better. And here's the craziest part. There wasn't a single clear winner. Each AI showed strengths that the other completely failed at. One is the engineer, the brain that thrives on structured logic, clean equations, and working code. The other is the communicator, the one that can persuade, storytell, empathize, and write with emotional tone that feels freakishly close to human. In this video, you're going to see both win and both lose. You're going to see where Gemini dominates, where ChatGPT takes the lead, and what these results mean for you if you code, write, research, or build anything with AI in 2025. So buckle up. No theories, no hype, just raw AI performance under real-world pressure. This is Gemini 3.0 Pro Thinking versus ChatGPT 5.1 Thinking, and it starts right now. Before we dive into the battlefield, let's meet the two competitors, not just as products, but as personalities. Because the truth is, these AIs don't just answer differently. They think differently. First, Gemini 3.0 Pro Thinking, Google's newest flagship model. If Gemini had a job title, it would be Senior Systems Engineer with a calculator in one hand and a physics textbook in the other. Gemini's focus is structure, logic, planning, chain of thought breakdowns, and highly organized reasoning. When you give Gemini a challenge, it doesn't try to guess what you want, it builds a blueprint. Problem, subproblems, hypothesis, execution, output. It's the kind of model that loves whiteboards, diagrams, and step-by-step tactical thinking. Google has been doubling down on the idea that AI should be more than a sentence generator. It should be a reasoning engine. And in many ways, Gemini 3.0 Pro Thinking is designed like a problem solver first, a communicator second. On the other side of the ring, ChatGPT 5.1 Thinking from OpenAI. If Gemini is the logical engineer, ChatGPT is the charismatic strategist, the one who can walk into a meeting, pitch a complex idea, and make everyone in the room believe in it. ChatGPT 5.1 Thinking has a different superpower, natural language intelligence. Not just knowing the answer, but knowing how to express it in a way that sounds human. Tone, rhythm, word choice, emotional awareness, the ability to sound confident or uncertain, humorous or serious, depending on what the situation demands. So even before we test them, the rivalry is already clear. Gemini is the structured thinker, precise, methodical, detail-driven. ChatGPT is the storyteller, intuitive, expressive, deeply tuned into how humans process language, not just logic. And that difference is going to matter. Because the challenges we're about to throw at them don't reward just one skill. Some require flawless reasoning. Some require working code. Some require creativity and personality. And some require all three at once. In other words, if you only look at output, you'll miss the story. The real question is not just what they produce, but how they think their way there. And we're about to watch that unfold in real time. Our first test was a pure engineering problem, something that forces the AI to juggle geometry, physics, and animation logic all at the same time. The prompt was simple to read, but brutal to execute. Create an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript animation of a ball bouncing inside a rotating hexagon, with gravity and friction applied. No hints, no clarifications, no do-overs, just one shot. Most human developers would need anywhere from 30 minutes to a few hours to get something like this working reliably. A rotating polygon plus collision detection plus physics decay? That's textbook-level math and a headache if you don't plan correctly. So here's how the AIs handled it. ChatGPT tried. It really did. It generated a structure, a hexagon, a ball, and some motion. But as soon as we ran the code, cracks started showing. The ball didn't collide correctly with the hexagon walls. The math for predicting impact angles wasn't accurate, and the animation gradually drifted out of sync. To be fair, ChatGPT wasn't disastrously wrong. It was close, but not precise enough to pass. And that's the thing about challenges like this. 90% correct still means the animation doesn't work. Then we ran Gemini, and the experience was completely different. Gemini approached the problem like an engineer. First, it broke the challenge into subcomponents. Draw the hexagon. Represent it as vertices. Calculate wall normals. Apply gravity and velocity. Detect collision vectors. Apply friction decay. Gemini didn't just write code. It wrote a game physics plan. And the code it produced ran correctly on the first try. The ball bounced realistically. The hexagon rotated smoothly. No weird clipping. No need to fix calculation drift later. And this tells us something important right away. When the task requires multi-step math and internal modeling of the world, Gemini behaves like a system designer. ChatGPT behaves like an assistant trying to satisfy the request as quickly as possible. Not a knockout, but definitely a first-round win for Gemini. Next, we flipped the challenge completely. No code, no physics, no formulas, just pure communication. The kind of task where logic alone can't save you, and where an AI either sounds like a real human being or like a machine doing its best impression of one. This is the kind of writing that's everywhere in 2025, LinkedIn posts, Medium articles, startup newsletters, Twitter threads. It requires confidence, rhythm, emotional pacing, and that subtle persuasive spark humans respond to instinctively. And we gave both AIs the exact same instructions. Let's start with Gemini. Now, technically, Gemini's answer was accurate, informative, structured. It read like a well-organized analyst briefing. But here's the issue. It sounded like an AI explaining what influencers sound like, rather than being one. It wasn't wrong. It just lacked voice. No personality. No flow. No sense that a real human was trying to persuade or inspire another human. If you posted it online, readers would immediately know. AI wrote this. ChatGPT, on the other hand, came out swinging. And the difference was immediate. The pacing was conversational. The tone was confident, but not robotic. It wove personal perspective into the writing. It used modern influencer language, clean, casual, punchy. Lines like that stick. They make readers nod. They feel like someone is speaking with conviction. And that's the subtle magic of ChatGPT 5.1 thinking. It doesn't just assemble sentences. It understands the emotional density of communication. Both essays delivered valid information, but only one felt like it came from a human who lives on Twitter at 2 a.m. writing hot takes with oat milk coffee in hand. And for a task where perception matters as much as content, round 2 goes decisively to ChatGPT. All right, time to shift gears again. No code, no creativity, no stylistic flair, just raw, deliberate reasoning. A logic puzzle that has been used for decades to test problem-solving ability, not just in AI, but in interviews for engineers, analysts, and mathematicians. The trick behind this puzzle is that it's deceptively simple. Many students, and many AIs, overthink it. They start simulating multiple poles, conditional branches, or complex permutations. But the optimal solution is elegant. One pull, one box, one deduction that cascades logically. So we asked ChatGPT first. It thought through the problem, but something went wrong. Instead of recognizing that all labels are guaranteed to be incorrect, it treated the box sampling less efficiently. It suggested checking a box and then using additional hypothetical outcomes that required extra tests we wouldn't get. A logical structure, yes, but not the correct one under the puzzle's strict rules. A soft buzzer sound. The incorrect conclusion highlights in red. Not catastrophic, but not correct. Then Gemini stepped in, and you could see the difference immediately, not in the answer, but in the thinking path. Gemini broke down the assumptions. All labels are wrong. Therefore, any box's content cannot match its label. The mixed box must contain a single type. So sampling that box reveals everything. Gemini walked the reasoning calmly and systematically, like a mathematician with a clipboard. One test, one sample, full logical deduction. Split screen, Gemini with check mark, ChatGPT with X. And this test highlights something important. When faced with structured logical constraints, Gemini doesn't guess. It constructs a tree of reasoning and works backward to the solution. ChatGPT, in this round, didn't fall apart, but it didn't minimize the problem correctly either. So with the score now 2-1, Gemini takes another win in the logic arena. Now it was time for a challenge that demanded both logic and visual execution, something halfway between physics, animation, and code structure. This is a deceptively interesting test. It's not as mathematically intense as collision detection or pendulum modeling, but it requires discipline in animation logic, clarity in rendering, and code that doesn't fall apart under browser execution. In other words, if the AI cuts corners, you'll see it instantly. Gemini approached the task like a structured graphics assignment. Create a central object. Define orbital paths. Use CSS transforms and keyframes. Animate rotation at different speeds. The result? Clean, readable, consistent code. The planets moved at stable intervals, each with their own orbit timing. No drifting. No need for developer intervention. And then, ChatGPT. What surprised me here is that ChatGPT didn't just do the same thing. It took a slightly different approach. Instead of relying solely on CSS animation, it introduced more JavaScript-driven motion. The effect was almost identical visually, but the logic behind it was different. Gemini leaned toward elegance and simplicity. ChatGPT leaned toward richer motion control. But here's the key takeaway. Both worked. Both ran on the first attempt. Both produced a visually pleasing miniature solar system that could easily be part of a coding tutorial, a game prototype, or an educational web module. So what does this tell us? That when the task is well-structured, predictable, and doesn't demand advanced physics reasoning, both AIs operate like competent front-end developers. They understand motion, layering, and animation logic. They produced reliable code without needing correction or debugging. And in this round, there is no winner. Gemini continues to show precise execution. ChatGPT demonstrates flexible implementation. Both models passed cleanly. So we move on. Score unchanged. And the next test is where things get a lot more intense. Now for the final and hardest technical challenge. One that exposes whether an AI can handle deep simulation logic and real physics. A multi-pendulum system. This is one of the most brutal classical mechanics problems you can throw at an AI. A double pendulum isn't just two sticks swinging around. It's chaotic motion, technically deterministic, but wildly sensitive to small changes. If the equations of motion aren't perfect, the simulation collapses. ChatGPT's response was impressive. It generated a clean physics loop using JavaScript's animation frame. The math for torque, angular acceleration, and velocity was solid. The simulation produced accurate natural movement, smooth, believable, consistent. And importantly, ChatGPT structured its math clearly. Define system parameters. Apply Lagrange dynamics. Update angles. Render with canvas. This wasn't boilerplate animation. It was a real physics engine. But then Gemini stepped in and took the task to another level. Not only did Gemini implement the physics correctly, it added interactivity. Without being asked. Sliders for pendulum length, mass, initial angle, damping factors. Users could tweak values in real time and instantly watch the simulation behave differently. That's a different mindset. Gemini wasn't just trying to solve the problem. It was designing a tool, a small physics lab where the user could experiment. Both AIs passed the test. Both simulations worked. But the difference in thinking was clear. ChatGPT implemented a solution. Gemini designed an experience. And this test shows something important about the model's personalities that has been quietly true through every challenge so far. ChatGPT executes incredibly well when the instructions are textual, conceptual, or human-facing. Gemini performs best when the task involves internal structure, physics, logic, mathematics, or multi-step reasoning. But raw results are just numbers. Now that we've seen the challenges, what do these differences actually mean? What kind of thinking are these AIs really doing? And what does it mean for anyone using AI to build, write, or create in 2025? Now that the experiments are done, it's time to step back and ask a bigger question. Why did ChatGPT and Gemini behave differently? Why did one excel in storytelling while the other dominated rigid logic and complex modeling? Because these AI models, even in 2025, don't think the same way. And watching them solve the same problems reveals their personalities. When given an open-ended instruction, write a speech, explain a concept, make this emotional, ChatGPT instantly forms structure. It organizes thoughts like a human storyteller. Intro, build-up, connection, payoff. This is why ChatGPT crushed the speechwriting test. It doesn't just answer a question. It frames it. Because here's the thing. What that means is, let's go deeper. These subtle choices keep humans engaged. They create momentum, reader retention, without ever calling attention to themselves. This is the thinking style of a writer, a marketer, a presenter, a teacher. But Gemini showed something different. It didn't tell a story. It built a machine. When tasks became structured and rule-based, a physics, algorithms, financial constraints, a logic modeling, Gemini didn't just answer. It architected. That's the thinking style of an engineer or a simulation engine. So what you're seeing isn't which AI is smarter, but which kind of intelligence fits which kind of task. Put either one into the wrong environment, and it will look weaker than it really is. The secret isn't choosing the best AI model. It's choosing the right model for the right job. No single AI is the best. But together, you can cover almost every human domain. Think of them as two elite specialists standing in the same room, waiting for instructions. One speaks emotion. One thinks in equations. In 2025, people keep asking, which model will replace us? But maybe that's the wrong fear. Because what these tests show is something more interesting. AI isn't replacing specialists. It's letting regular people borrow them. With the right prompt, you gain a world-class writer and a world-class engineer at the same time. So the real question isn't, which AI is better, but who will learn to use them well first? So after pushing both models through real engineering challenges, creative writing, logic puzzles, physics, and system simulations, what's the verdict? In raw logic, complex simulations, structured mathematics, and engineering reasoning, Gemini 3.0 Pro Thinking stands out. The pendulum system, the solar system simulation, the logic puzzle, the interactive UI. Gemini didn't just answer the question. It constructed frameworks. It thought like a machine designed to solve machines. It approaches problems like a systems engineer. But when the task required communicating to humans, ChatGPT 5.1 revealed a different strength. Not logic, but presence. It understands pacing, climaxes, rhetorical flow, human attention. So who wins? A system that models physics flawlessly, or one that convinces a human audience to care? The truth is, there is no overall winner. There are two clear champions in two different arenas. If your task needs multivariable reasoning, physics modeling, a UI logic, structured computation, algorithmic breakdown, then Gemini is the powerhouse. But if you need scripts, essays, marketing, influencer blogs, emotional connection, or anything built to hold human attention, ChatGPT is the strongest hand. And if you're working on a project that needs both, no rule says you have to pick one. The most successful creators in 2025 will be the ones who combine them. Gemini to design the engine, ChatGPT to explain why it matters. In past decades, you needed a coder, a writer, a marketer, a designer, a strategist. Now you can borrow specialist-level skill in all those areas. If you know which AI to call at the right moment. We used to fear AI replacing workers. But what's happening is more disruptive. AI is turning individuals into teams. A student can now think like an engineer and write like a TED speaker. A solo founder can pitch like a Silicon Valley CEO and prototype like a senior developer. So here's where things get interesting. If today we already have natural language reasoning, mathematical logic, creative narrative, code generation, adaptive simulation, what happens when these strengths merge into a single model? That's the next leap. Not bigger models, but unified intelligence. Systems that can reason like Gemini and communicate like ChatGPT at the same time. So no, there isn't one model that won today. Gemini proved what engineered reasoning looks like. ChatGPT proved what human communication feels like. And together, they showed us the future direction of AI, not replacing humans, but expanding what humans can do at the speed of thought. And if you want more AI battles, breakdowns, and real-world comparisons, don't forget to subscribe.